I think what is interesting to me is that it hasn't really taken a lot of time. And right now, we're starting to get ready to talk about more of those tactical, strategic things because everybody's in alignment. We're clear. We're meeting on a regular basis to make sure that everybody's aligned with what is important. And really kind of just that support first mentality and making sure that above all else support is the number one priority no matter what project you're working on, no matter what else you're doing.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision.
Welcome to another episode in our recurring series, Beyond the First 30 Days. In this series, we are doing a bit of Where Are They Now? By catching up with some of the CIOs we interviewed 2 years ago. We want to see what has changed and what has not. Today, we're visiting with Bill Serva, the CIO for Goodwill Industries of Central and Northern Arizona. When we talked with Bill in 2020, we had him look back on his early days as CIO and what it was like to be promoted from within to the CIO role. Now, 5 years into his role with Goodwill, we're going to take a look back on the last couple of years and how the role of CIO has changed, and maybe ask Bill to do a little future thinking about what the CIO role is going to look like in the future. So, Bill, welcome back to Status Go.
Thanks, Jeff. It's always great to talk to you.
I have been so looking forward to this. I enjoy each one of our conversations when you and I sit down and chat. And to our listeners, Bill and I were talking a little bit before we started the recording, and we were talking about, well, we'll just let this conversation go where it wants to go, which is usually the way our conversations go anyway. For our listeners, Bill, why don't you give a little bit of your background and what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I've been working in technology for 20 years in a bunch of different industries. Before this, I was in food service distribution, retail grocery, and I landed at Goodwill just over 12 years ago. Last month was my 12-year anniversary. And so, for the last 7 years, I've been the head of the IT department at Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona, and we've gotten the opportunity to do some great things over the last couple of years. Some people may call it digital transformation. I know we both struggle with that term, but really taking legacy systems and upgrading them and getting organizations moved onto enterprise class systems that can really support quick growth and scalability so that organizations can continue to grow and generate revenue. And so specifically in the last 2 years, we finished our Workday implementation for HR, finance, and payroll. And that's been great. And we've seen a lot of great operational efficiencies through the implementation of that platform, and just continuing to look at what we need to do next to continue to bring the organization into the future.
That's awesome. And I have to admit, I did bad math because I said 5 years in your role. It's 7 years. That shows you how old I'm getting because time just flies by. Well, let's dig into that digital transformation and some of the things that you all have been doing there at Goodwill, because I know many of our listeners are going through some of those same things. And it really started with your approach to cloud, right?
Yeah, it did.
So what did you set off on this path of cloud first or cloud focused? Was it a written strategy or a specific strategy that you implemented, or did it just more organically happen?
I guess it kind of organically happened, and then it just made sense. Being a nonprofit and having access to some free, pretty great technology for free gives you some opportunities to try some stuff out at a pretty low risk. And so, one of the first things that we did when the Microsoft Office 365 platform was released, well, not right away, but after it got stable, it was a little rough in the beginning. But we were having some challenges with email on premises. We were running Exchange, and we had a couple of outages. And my system administrator at the time was really big on having Exchange on premises because that's just the way that we always did it. and
Right.
then we had a day and a half outage. And I
Ooh.
looked at the yeah, and then I looked at the uptime for Office 365 in the cloud for the last 4 quarters, and I was like, Dave, can you give me this? And Dave's like, okay, yeah, okay, we'll move to the cloud. And so really, that Exchange migration was the first thing, the first real big thing that we moved to the cloud. And boy, you know, it just gave us so much more storage. We had 2 gig email boxes before. We got 50 with Office
Hmm.
365. We got rid of a bunch of infrastructure. I didn't need an Exchange admin anymore, so those functions could be directed towards more customer impacting things in the business. And so, really seeing the success of something like that, that everybody needs and uses. Everybody's using
Hmm.
email. You got to do email. And we had done an on-premises email upgrade before, and I had told myself I would not do another one of these. I mean,
They're
I'm sure
painful.
you.
They're
Oh,
painful.
yes. And you go, how much email? And so that was really successful. And then so as we started looking at other technologies, it really just made sense. And a lot of companies were moving more to that SaaS-based model, software
Hmm.
as a service, and not having to have the infrastructure on site to manage and upgrade and purchase. Uh, and then the other piece is, as a nonprofit, security is super important regardless of what kind of organization you are. But if you don't have a lot of money to invest in security, I feel like that the SaaS applications are a way to kind of shift the security to a third party. These big organizations, because I can tell you, Microsoft is doing a lot better securing our Exchange environment than we were,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what it evolved out of. And then, this idea, thankfully, being a little bit ahead of the curve and giving people access to their applications anywhere, we tied them together with Okta for single sign-on so that we had one username and password across all applications, and then we could put in multi-factor authentication. And so that made it really easy to expand to other cloud-based applications because it tied them all together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
when people started having to work from home in the beginning of 2020, I was super thankful that we had done a lot of that stuff because
Yeah.
it's so much easier. I could go home and work out of a Chrome browser for 90% of the applications that we
Yeah.
use,
Yeah.
and so it made that process so much
That
easier.
way. Well, let's talk more about. I want to dig into the Workday implementation. Did you guys do both the HR modules and the finance modules? You went full gamut.
Yeah. So after our POS implementation that we had done, Microsoft Dynamics 365 in the cloud,
Hmm.
we recognized we need to do more of getting off legacy systems. And we had about a dozen different legacy applications that were doing those functions: HR, finance, payroll. Some of which we had developed, some of which we had purchased that were old. We even wrote our own applicant tracking system, which I would never do that again. But when you're a nonprofit that's young and they
Hmm.
wrote it before I started, you got people and not money, so go write it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so really we started looking at, we called it an ERP implementation, but it was really an HR, finance, payroll implementation to solve all of those pain points between all of those integrations between systems that were
Hmm.
legacy, some of which we couldn't upgrade, some of which we didn't want to invest time in. And so, that process, it was a really interesting process all the way from the software selection, which involved meeting with the C-suite and getting from each one of them, what's your reasoning behind doing this? Because I had my own
Hmm.
reasons. I don't want to support this legacy hardware, legacy
Yeah. Yeah.
applications, but finance wanted something and HR wanted something else, and so really to kind of meet with the executive team, extract that from them, and get that into a comprehensive. Here's the why behind this,
Hmm.
because the last thing I wanted to do was pick a software and implement it, and everybody be like, "Bill, why'd you pick this?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't pick it. You guys picked it."
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was clear up front, doing that RFP process. And then at the same time, really talking to that group about the importance of strong project management. One of the things that I've developed since the last time we talked, I think, was this enterprise program management office that we have here at Goodwill of Central and Northern Arizona. And when I started doing some research before we did this Workday implementation, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little scared. And this was the
Hmm.
biggest software implementation of my entire career, and I've been doing this for a little while, at least 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of stuff that makes or breaks people's careers. And I didn't
Yeah.
want, I didn't want to break it. Like, I'm like,
Yeah, you kind of like that paycheck. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, and it's nice. And so, you know, leveraging kind of the successes and also some of the struggles that we had during the point of sale implementation, talking to the executive team about, well, and then doing that research. A Gartner study showed that 50% of ERP implementations fail due
yeah,
to ineffective project management. 50.
yeah.
And I'm like, if I can get some good project managers, I can cut my odds in half.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, so my chances of success go up. So, really getting that team involved in the process of selecting a really good candidate. And, let me tell you, good project managers aren't cheap, but they are worth their weight in gold. If you can
Hmm.
find a good project manager that has been there and done some of this. And so that is what we looked for. And we found somebody uh, from another organization that was looking to move on for a number of reasons. And then we hired her. And what was really great about that is that there were certain things that we didn't know about project management, but there was a whole bunch of other things that we didn't know that we didn't know. And those were
Oh
the
yeah,
things
yeah.
that we needed this person for. And we had a steering committee and we had some governance around some projects and things like that. But this person was really able to come in and get a bunch of things in order in a very short period of time, and then set us up for a successful, big software implementation. And so she and
Yeah.
I were co-directors on this project, worked with our implementation provider to really, hey, what do you guys recommend from your years of experience doing this as far as resources, and then really kind of built the team around that. And so, I think that, the evolution of not just the organization and looking at technology, but the maturity of the organization and looking at people and processes in addition to technology. And for something like this, that was just important.
Hmm.
And those guys were critical to the success of this Workday implementation. I've talked to a couple of people that think you can just hire a partner to go do this. And I mean, you can, uh,
Yep.
but it's going to be expensive and probably not what you want at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think partners play an important role, but
Oh yeah,
you need that inside um, person that can navigate internally and bring people together, and a third party's not always able to do that. Do I remember right? During your Workday implementation, there was a change in leadership at at Goodwill, or am I thinking of a different time frame?
no, there was a change in world circumstances. I mean, we started the Workday project in the beginning of 2020, and we
Oh,
had done.
good timing.
Yeah, and so we're all excited. Biggest project of my career with this amazing kickoff meeting, biggest kickoff meeting of the organization. People were super excited, ready to go. We did what we call these foundation alignment sessions, where we got experts from Workday and AVAP and us, and
Yeah.
all in a room for like 8 weeks, and we developed the system and did spreadsheets and sent things in and all this great stuff. And getting ready to do our unit testing at the end of February, beginning of March, and we all know what happened then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so having to uh, completely change the strategy midstream and go from, I mean, literally we were talking about still doing in-person testing like 2 weeks before we actually started it, and we had to
Yeah.
scrap it because we had the stay-at-home order from our governor. We had people that couldn't travel,
Hmm.
and so we had to move to a 100% remote model. And so that was how we did the rest of the project, and it was amazing. And I will tell you, in some aspects, COVID did us a favor in that people have a lot less distractions when they're at home by themselves.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
aren't coming up to their desk. They're not asking them for this, that, or the other thing. And we'd be on Zoom calls with people for 8 hours a day, where people would be doing testing, and it was just amazing how well it worked out. And I really wonder, after coming out of that project and seeing that, we kept talking about when can we do stuff in person, and we wanted to people wanted to come out and have a big celebration, and that never happened. I mean,
Yeah.
we went through all of 2020, and we went live on December 20th of 2020, and we were all still remote.
Yeah.
And Jeff, it makes me wonder how the future, we talked a little bit about the future in the beginning of this, how the future of these kinds of projects are going to change, because
Hmm.
historically, even for these big cloud-based implementations, the historical thought process has been you fly people out, you get people together in a room, you order in lunch,
Hmm.
you're paying for people's hotels, and it's a very expensive part of the project.
Yeah, yeah.
And while there were still a couple of instances where it made sense for us to bring people together, and we did that. I mean, there was some meetings that we had where people were masked and socially distanced, and to do some of the end-to-end planning that we needed to do because of the complexity of that testing. But for a lot of it, we did it remote, and I wonder if vendors are going to push for that. I think businesses are going to have to push for vendors to come on site,
Yeah.
and the businesses are going to have to pay for it. And I don't know. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with all that, because if we were able to do a giant project like this almost completely remotely,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we?
Well, I think lots of companies are realizing that a lot of the work that they thought had to be done in person can be just effective, if not more effective, done remotely. And you're right; it cuts way down on flying consultants all over the states to work on these projects, and uh, it it drives the same or better results. So I
Yeah.
think we're in for a change. I think you're absolutely right. When you think back on the last 2 years, and then I want to shift to where your focus is today. Um, how is Goodwill? I've got a soft spot in my heart for Goodwill, having spent several years at the organization here in Indiana. How are you all coming out of this pandemic, and where are things now with you?
Jeff, our organization is really strong. And, one of the things, I mean, I've been in thrift retail for, 12 years now. And one of the interesting things about thrift retail is sales are usually pretty good. We're even better in a recession,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
even in tough times. And it's interesting because we saw during the pandemic, the donations went through the roof. I think everybody did their, cleaning out their house and multiple trips to the Goodwill. And
Hmm.
we had to rent trailers and extra space. And we had so many donations, more donations than we'd ever had.
Yeah.
But then, our sales are still really good also. And, the budget that we had set for last year, we blew that out of the water. And
Awesome.
we've kind of shifted those dollars we do still have some in-person services around helping people find jobs and building a resume and interviewing skills, but we've really shifted a lot of those to virtual. And we were looking to do some of that before the pandemic because we saw that less people were coming into our career centers. And the kinds of people that we provide services to, the people that don't have jobs, especially the younger people, weren't coming into a career center to get services. They want to do it on their phone or from their
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
And so what's been really cool is developing that mycareeradvisor.com platform where we set up this virtual career advisor that people can go and get the same kinds of services they could get in person at a career center. Now, there's
Hmm.
some exceptions to that, like if you wanted to get a certification, like a Microsoft certification or some proctored exam, you got to come into a career center still, and we'll provide that at no cost to people. But you know, it has been that's been an interesting shift as well. And then the other really exciting thing for us, I don't know if you saw the news recently, but we just broke ground on our first Excel center.
Oh, I
And
knew you were
yeah,
getting ready. I didn't know you'd broken ground. That's
yeah,
awesome.
we've been getting ready for 2 years. We were gonna That was another thing. That was something else we were
Yeah.
gonna do in 2020. And for those of you listening, the Excel Center is a concept that was started by the Indianapolis Goodwill, and it's an adult high school where anybody over the age of 21 can get a free, a no cost high school education. And it's got cool things like on site childcare. And there's these life coaches that really encourage people and work with them. And, the Indianapolis Goodwill has shown how this actually breaks the cycle of poverty in some families because,
Mhm.
people that couldn't go to school for one reason or another, they had a kid or somebody got sick and they had to drop out of high school. It gives them another chance, and then their kids see them going to school and how important
Yep.
it is, and so they do more. And it's been really cool. And so yeah, it's cool that Indianapolis started this, and they kind of licensed it out. They figured it out. They packaged it. And they work with other Goodwill organizations to do this. And so our first Excel Center is going to open in August of this year,
Oh,
and we are
fantastic.
super excited about it. Yeah, we had the groundbreaking, and the governor was there, and it was really cool. I mean, this is years in the making, and
Yeah.
so being able to do things like that also, and people being really excited about it,
Hmm.
it's yeah.
That's excellent. And again, for our listeners, the Excel Centers, one of the interesting things about their model is this is not a GED program.
Hmm.
Not knocking GED programs in any way, shape, or form, but this is a state recognized state high school diploma, and it's a terrific program. Well, Bill, as you're sitting here today in nearing the end of Q1 2022, when we're having this conversation, what are some of the things that are on your plate right now? Where's your focus?
So I think one of the things that we've been focusing on at the beginning of the year is really kind of getting back to basics from an operational standpoint. And while COVID was helpful for things like the projects that you had to be head down and do the work, I think that it was maybe a little bit more difficult, or maybe we took our eye off the ball of the day-to-day support a little bit.
Uh,
And so, I like to think of, managing an IT department as this pyramid where, everybody talks about you got to be strategic and you got to come up with these long-term projects and be visionary. And yeah, you do. But in the middle, there's some tactical stuff that's like some smaller short-term things that you can do. But a lot of people don't talk about that bottom of the pyramid, which is the operational, keep the lights on stuff.
yeah,
The not sexy, the not exciting stuff that you just have to do. And if you're not good at that stuff, or if that stuff starts to kind of backslide a little bit, the business notices, and you lose a lot of credibility on those tactical and
yeah,
strategic things. And so, that's been, not that it's been horrible, but the support standards slid to a point where they weren't as good as I wanted them to be. And so
hmm,
we've really had kind of a renewed focus in the first couple of months of this year on operational, and I'm already starting to see some of the effects of that.
hmm,
And really, it's about making sure that you've got people focused on the right things, that you're stressing to the people on your team how important the operation stuff is, even if it might not be the most exciting stuff. Also, making sure that you're following the governance processes that you have in place. We got a little sloppy around change management,
yeah,
and a lot of the customer-facing incidents that we caused were a result of not following our processes. And so, making sure that we have those meetings and that we're talking to each other about what the potential consequences are before we make any change to a production environment. And so, and I think what is interesting to me about that is that it hasn't really taken a lot of time. And we started really this refocus in January, and you kind of get everybody on the page and are on the same page. And right now, we're starting to get ready to talk about more of those tactical, strategic
hmm,
things because everybody's in alignment. We're clear. We're meeting on a regular basis to make sure that everybody's aligned with what is important, and really kind of just that support first mentality, and making sure that above all else, support is the number one priority, no matter what project you're working on, no matter
yeah,
what else you're doing.
yeah,
And so so there's that, and then obviously there are some of the more strategic things that we're doing. We're continuing to move. Actually, we're not so much moving legacy systems to the cloud as putting in new systems that don't exist.
hmm,
So we're doing some things around document management this year. We are vetting some transportation management companies for doing some logistics around moving our donated product around in the stores into our central warehouse. And so those are two of the bigger projects that we're doing for Goodwill in the upcoming. That's kind of the strategic stuff that we're doing starting this year.
I love that because I love that concept of the triangle about strategic, tactical, and operational. I know our listeners have heard me quote my buddy Glenn Keller probably a million times, but Glenn always says, no one wants to talk strategy when the printer's down. Right, and it plays to what exactly what you were
Oh
saying
man.
is that when things start, when you take your eye off that ball, your partners in the business begin to notice. They get frustrated with the level of service that you're providing, and no one wants to talk about the new strategic initiative. They want to talk about why isn't my laptop fixed, or why doesn't the printer print? And but I also love that over the last 2 years you've done this digital transformation without really calling it digital transformation. You've focused internally with some of the work that you have been doing with Workday and some of those things, but you've also done some digital transformation externally, which I forget the name of the application that you were talking about earlier, Bill, about rather than coming into the work centers, they can do this online. But that's awesome, because you've impacted the way that your customers interact with the organization digitally through technology as well. And
Yeah.
I think that fills out that pyramid.
Yeah. I'll put another plug in here for mycareeradvisor.com.
There you go. mycareeradvisor.com. There you
Go
go.
check it out.
There,
Create a profile. We'll help you do your resume.
do I have to be in northern or central Arizona?
You don't. We do have region specific resources available. So the site is localized. We operate in central and northern Arizona, the Tucson Goodwill, and there's a couple of other Goodwills that we operate in where there's local resources. So if you go to the page, it'll ask you where you are and just tell it,
Yep.
pick a state.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's a few up there, but there's some. A lot of the stuff is universal across territories, and those skills of the job skills, resume writing, certifications, there's some universal things, and then the local stuff is really connecting people with local resources, local jobs in their region. And so that's where you see the difference. So if you go in and out and pick a couple different regions, you'll see stuff. It's a little bit different, but the core functionality is the same across the board.
Okay. Well, we'll be sure and put a link to it in the show notes, just so if you have short-term memory problems like I do, you'll be able to remember the name of it. Now, before we wrap up, I really want to get to something on a more personal level. I know that you have been on a bit of a personal journey over the last couple of years as well. And you wrote an interesting blog post.
Yeah.
And I love the title. The title is "I'm a White Guy. Why should I care about DE&I?"
Yep.
Talk to us about that and a little bit about that journey that you've been on, Bill.
Yeah. So we as an organization really doubled down our efforts around DEI after the murder of George Floyd. I think a lot of people saw, it was very clear a lot of the problems in our society that still exist that we just don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so our organization decided to double down and set up a DEI council and really do more around the DEI stuff. And one of the things that they did was this for the senior leadership team, so for the vice presidents and above, is we went through this diversity training. I don't even know if that's what you would call it, but really, learning about the history of this country, talking about what whiteness is and white supremacy, and not the the knee-jerk reactions that everybody has to it when you put it in the media and it becomes a soundbite, but really that the society has been built to give certain people an advantage, and it's people like me, middle-aged white guy, have had advantages in my career that not everybody else has had. And don't get me wrong, if you're a white guy and you're at a high level position, I'm sure you've worked hard and I'm sure you've done things to get where you are. But I can bet you that somebody that's a person of color that's in that same position worked harder than you did. And there's something wrong with that. And so I started doing a lot of reflecting and thinking about this and learning. And so we have this as part of we have this week in learning segment that we do where somebody on the leadership team writes an article and sends it out to the organization. And so I decided to write this article. I'm like, I'm going to write this article. I'm a white guy. Why should I care about DEI? And so I wrote it, and I vetted it with a couple of people on the DEI council that are people of color. And I talked to them, and I was just amazed to hear their stories. And what's sad is that people don't tell their stories because they don't want to make us feel uncomfortable,
Yeah,
the white
yeah,
guys. And I started to hear stories from everybody that I talked to about ways that they were discriminated against in small ways or large ways. And I took all of that, and I was actually I was inspired by one of my coworkers, who said, you should really put like a warning on the front of this thing, like, hey, you're going to be uncomfortable. And I got inspired by him, and I wrote the thing down the next day, and I vetted it with a couple of people, and kind of got permission to send it. And they didn't really edit it. They sent it out to the organization, and I was a little bit surprised. And then I turned it into a blog post, and um, it, I put it on LinkedIn, and it just went nuts.
yeah,
And I was
yeah,
shocked because I'm the kind of guy. Once I learn something, I just assume everyone else has learned it. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
and then I put something out. I'm like, well, hey, everybody, I learned this, so you probably all know it as well. But the response I got was crazy, and it was like thousands of
hmm,
views and reposts, and people reaching out to me, and it really opened up my LinkedIn network even more, and helped
yeah,
me to be even more passionate about DEI. And I've been doing some work with Emily Bopp, who is in the Indianapolis area. She's doing some
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
around DEI, and we've done this racial realities conversation with people, and it's been really eye opening as well. And so, really, what I've been trying to do through this journey is figure out how to talk to white people about uh, our advantages, and about race without turning people off. Because
yeah,
I
yeah,
think if we could all just talk to each other and be open and real about the history of this country. And two things that are not, two contrary things can both be true. I mean, we can live in a great country that has done some horrible things. Those can
yes,
both be true statements. And I
yes,
think that's where people get caught up on, is it's one or the other.
yeah,
And it's complicated. And so, yeah, I feel very passionately about this, and I'm still going through my journey of figuring out how do I best move the DEI movement forward. Because it's not fair to put all of the work on people of color, because they're the ones that are discriminated against. I mean,
hmm,
white guys are the ones that all had to make all the changes. Like, I mean, women couldn't vote until white men said they could vote.
right,
Black people couldn't vote until white people said they could vote. And so we have a responsibility as people that have gotten the privilege in this society to do something about it. And so
right,
I'm trying to figure out what that is, Jeff, and I'm not 100% sure yet. But I think that there's a lot of work to be done still, and that I hope that we as a country can start to talk about systemic racism in a different way, that's not about sound bites and individual acts, and more about conversations about personal experiences, and what it really means to be white or black in America.
yeah, yeah. And I loved your post, and I went back and reread it again yesterday, and some of the comments that it sparked, it really did start a conversation online, and I thought that was great. And I love you didn't quite say it this way, but it's about being uncomfortable. It's not about feeling guilty because you're a
Yeah,
white guy,
yeah,
right? It's understanding and having empathy for those who may not have had the same opportunity that you had. And I think it's a great conversation starter. And I love that you're doing this exploration. As you and I have talked, I've been trying to do some of the same type of thing, and just use this platform. We've had several conversations on Status Go about this very subject for that very reason. We want to have a conversation, and we want to talk about it. And I just thought it was great. Thank you for letting me bring this into this conversation today as well, Bill. As usual, when you and I start talking, time flies. So, so I do want to leave our audience once again with a strong call to action. And we covered a lot of ground today, but I'd love for you to maybe identify one or two things that you recommend that our audience do tomorrow because they listened to our conversation today.
Yeah, I think one thing, and I said this last time we talked, is to check in with your team if you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And I've checked in with my team in a different way since the beginning of the year. I made a point to have a conversation with every single person on my team. Looking at this the support challenges, I've asked every single person, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? And any other thoughts that you might have. And I got some great feedback from people. I also got to know people on the team a little bit better. I feel like the team's a little bit stronger. And it really helped me with a couple of other inputs, really identify some things that we could do to make things better, not just from a support perspective, but for the team as a whole. And also along with that, I think, we've been back in the office for a little bit. And so maybe this is a little bit easier, but going back to, if you can, doing some in-person team building events. We've started, we do these lunch and learn sessions once a month where, everybody gets lunch. Everybody loves that. And they get to learn something. And so somebody talks on a topic of something they're working on, and that's great. And so, I think those things for sure, you can never spend too much time with your team, and especially coming through all of this. And I think, the other thing that's interesting, and I don't know if I have an answer for this one yet, is, go figure out the work from home thing, because I feel like nobody's figured it out yet. And, our organization has decided you're in the office 4 days, you're home 1 day, and the office is closed on Fridays. And that works okay for us. But I've been watching very closely what some of the bigger organizations are doing. And Jeff, I don't know if anybody's really got this hybrid work thing quite figured out yet. I think everybody's like, well, COVID is at a point where we can start talking about doing something different in April. And, my son, his company, it's 40% at home, 60% in the office. It's like, what does that mean?
Right.
You work 6 hours at home, and I don't know. I think that's one of the other things that I'm interested to see, and talking with other people often about what's that mix, because if anybody listening has any great ideas about how to hire and retain talent, I think I'm having some challenges there, especially for positions that are those system administrators in particular, that are mostly behind the scenes, that are not a whole lot of customer facing stuff. In a lot of cases, people don't even know that they exist unless they come out of their cube.
Yep.
And so, I think that's been a challenge as well. And I'm trying to figure that out. So if anybody's got any solutions out there, let me know.
That'd be great. And if you have a solution, let me know as well, and we'll have you on the show to talk about it. But I think you're spot on, Bill. I think those are great recommendations for our listeners to go out and do. I really want to thank you for carving out time to talk with us again. I know you're incredibly busy, and I appreciate it every time we have a chance to talk. So thanks a lot, Bill.
Jeff, I appreciate it. And I do enjoy these conversations. And the next time you're in Phoenix, or the next time I'm in Indianapolis, we'll have to get together for some coffee or something.
That sounds great. Maybe I'll come out for the grand opening of the Excel Center. Wouldn't that be fun?
August. It's going to be hot.
Yeah. It's always hot in Phoenix. Come on. All right. To our listeners, if you have a question or want to learn more, visit intervision.com. We'll have the show notes. We'll have links and contact information for Bill. This is Jeff Tunn for Bill Serva. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.